You're all
Good
set.
morning. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the webinar today, Security Threats and Mitigation, the Duality Between Reactive and Proactive Security. My name is Karen Larson and I work for DPI, Discovery Partners Institute, which is a division of the University of Illinois system. DPI is one of two partner organizations working on TechReady Illinois, which is hosting the webinar today. Before we get into the main portion of the webinar, let me tell you a bit about TechReady. So DPI had originally planned to launch their workforce development initiative in 2021, but then COVID came along and blew everything up. With so many people unemployed in the state and across the country, we knew that we needed to pull that launch forward right away. We partnered with another local organization, P33, and launched TechReady in early June. TechReady is focused on increasing the availability and access to training programs in high-demand tech fields. We offer many certificates through our programs, and some of the programs also include a student experience that includes study groups, coaching, and projects. The whole program has been curated with leading employer-driven input. And we've grouped our programming into 4 different learning tracks, including data analytics, cloud computing, software development, and cybersecurity. Altogether, we have 10 providers delivering over 20 different programs that include content for all skill levels from introductory to advanced. They run from a full weekend to 32 weeks of learning and from free to several $1000s for a full certificate. To learn more, please visit us at www.techreadyillinois.com. So now let's get on to the subject at hand today. So to set the stage, let me share with you a couple statistics around cybersecurity. In 2019, businesses invested even more in technology, new privacy regulations were passed, and cyber threats became more sophisticated. To meet the growing demand of today's businesses, ISC2 estimates that the US cybersecurity workforce would need to grow by 62%. Top jobs in the cybersecurity space include cybersecurity engineer, with an average salary of $106,000, cybersecurity analyst, average salary of $95,000, network engineer or architect at $113,500 average salary, cybersecurity consultant, average salary of $91,000, and cybersecurity manager or administrator at $105,000. We'll include the link to that source material in the chat. So now that we've set the stage for the need and the potential within cybersecurity, let me tell you about our program today. Cybersecurity is an essential concern as we continue to witness a rise in threats to individuals, corporations, and governments. In this talk, we will cover a variety of security threats aimed for the masses, as well as those crafted specifically for identified targets. We then turn to the questions of mitigation and prevention, which involve 2 broad approaches. The first is a reactive approach that focuses on detecting and mitigating these threats as they happen. The other is a proactive approach where the underlying root cause of the threats are identified and addressed. We argue the concurrent pursuit of these seemingly opposite directions as essential in a broader cybersecurity strategy. Along the way, Professor Venkatakrishnan will highlight results from his past and ongoing research along both of these dimensions. In actuality, we may only get to one portion, the first portion of the topic today, and we may take the second part up in a subsequent webinar. Our speaker today is Professor Venkatakrishnan, whose research interests are in the security of software systems, and more specifically in the areas of vulnerability analysis, attack detection and prevention, as well as security conscious software design, development, and verification. He received the National Science Foundation Career Award in 2009 and has received 4 Best Paper Awards at security conferences. For his research contributions, he received the University of Illinois Scholar Award in 2017, and for his contributions to education, he was awarded the Award of Excellence in Teaching in 2015, the highest university level teaching award. He received his PhD degree in computer science from Stony Brook University in 2004. Venkat is a professor of computer science at University of Illinois Chicago and is also the interim director of research at Discovery Partners Institute, where he leads DPI's Research and Development Program. Please join me in welcoming Venkatakrishnan. I will stop sharing my screen and Venkat can share his.
Thank you, Karen. Are you able to see my screen?
We can.
Yes, great. So I'm going to talk about the duality between reactive and proactive security, but it'll take a bit for us to completely parse that title. But I want to just start by talking about targeted cyber attacks. And when we talk about targeted cyber attacks, we are talking about these stories that often grab the media's attention. They are attacks on organizations that are getting more sophisticated, stealthy, and more serious. And usually the goal for the attackers is to steal data, disrupt operations, or destroy infrastructure. And the thing that is different, with targeted cyber attacks is that they are generally carried out over a much longer time frame, a few weeks to months, and therefore they are harder to detect. The attacker isn't, is generally interested in carrying out these attacks in a way that remains as undetectable as possible. So these attacks are often customized to the target rather than using, commodity tools that you may find in some underground market or using some malware. They are crafted specifically for targets, and the thousands of incidents every year affecting small to large organizations in different industrial sectors. Just to give one example, I start with that story. Maersk is one of the largest, supply vessel operator in the world since 1996. It has offices in over 130 countries, and about 80,000 employees in 2018. And the story of what happened to them on June 27, 2017 is worth sort of recounting. On that day, employees of the organization saw that their screen was something flashed on their screen that looked similar to what you see on the screen. It said, your files are getting encrypted. And if you see this text, then they are no longer accessible because they have been grabbed and encrypted. And the message also said, don't waste your time. Nobody can recover your files. And you need to follow these instructions in order to get the decryption key. You have to send $300 worth of Bitcoin to the following address and your Bitcoin wallet ID and so on. And a whole bunch of instructions after that. And a number of them saw this, right? And what happened in the next few hours was complete mayhem, right? Within 2 hours, employees were running down hallways, yelling to turn off computers. They were running into conference rooms and unplugging machines in the middle of meetings. They were jumping over keycard gates, paralyzed by the mysterious malware, right? And it brought the whole operation down to a halt, right? And basically, the interruption cost, 200 to 300 million in lost revenues just over the few hours, right? And what they ended up doing, the attackers, was to use this cyber weapon called NotPetya. It has its origins from in an act of cyber war from Russia to Ukraine, which really got out of control. The same piece of cyber weapon was used in hospitals in Pennsylvania, in a chocolate factory in Tasmania, FedEx offices in Europe, and in fact, it spread back to Russia and was used at Russian targets as well. It ended up striking the state oil company in Russia. And any ransom payment that victims tried to offer was just futile. And NotPetya was the fastest propagating piece of malware and the most destructive cyber attack ever conducted. It caused more than 10 billion in damages, right? So why I'm mentioning this story is it tells you what, broadly cyber criminals are able to do with these type of cyber weapons. And the problem of mitigating against these threats has become more important than ever, right? And this is not the only one. We've seen a number of cyber attacks over the years. So for instance, you may all read about the Target attack, where 40 million payment card credentials and 70 million customer records were lost. This was in 2013. There was an attack on the Office of Personnel Management, described by federal officials as one of the largest breaches of government data in the history of the US. And there was an attack in 2018 on Marriott, where hundreds of millions of customer records were stolen, including credit card and passport numbers that were exfiltrated by attackers. We all have heard of Stuxnet, which was targeting nuclear facilities in Iran. Sometimes it's being referred to as the first modern digital weapon, where it was used to cause damage to the infrastructure, cyber and physical infrastructure in Iran. So these are some of the high profile attacks, but every day these attacks are being carried out. So, some general notable trends, healthcare institutions in US and Europe are at the center of attention. And these attacks use multi-stage techniques. Like the attacker initially performs some compromise, gets into the host network, and then performs some reconnaissance, and then uses data exfiltration strategies to siphon if they are on the lookout for sensitive data, and then cleaning up the tracks and exiting. So multi-stage techniques, and often involved with the involvement of nation state actors. And the most common causes for these attacks are application vulnerabilities, either by way of compromised accounts, social engineering, insider theft. So what do we do? Given the spate of these attacks, there are two broad approaches for securing systems and networks. One that I call reactive versus proactive. So reactive technologies are those aimed at thwarting or detecting attacks. Examples are intrusion detection prevention systems, firewalls, perimeter controls, application filters, antivirus, anti-malware tools. So what's the main benefit of using these technologies? The main benefit is that you get security here and now. The main drawback is that they are, by nature reactive, and they can miss attacks and produce false alarms. So, and I just want to pause here and take a quick poll. How many of you have heard the terms intrusion detection systems? Can you answer on the chat if you have, if you are familiar with these terms? Okay, so I just want to gauge the level I need to speak at. It looks like some people have, some people haven't. Intrusion detection systems are those that look for activities inside an enterprise and flag activities as suspicious. When it appears that a set of activities doesn't conform to what the enterprise systems are normally used to doing. And they are realized in different forms. Let me go back to the full screen mode. So firewalls are ones that apply some rules on the traffic that comes into and goes out of an enterprise, right? And perimeter controls are more broader examples of firewalls. Application filters, these are more like blockers that prevent access to certain websites or certain web requests that come in. And antivirus Anti-malware tools are those like, the ones that we use on our desktop, right? So these are all mostly, technologies that react to, ongoing security threats and provide some level of protection. But obviously they're not perfect, given the ongoing spate of attacks. What are proactive technologies? These are technologies that are aimed at addressing the root cause of the problems. So if there is a security hole in a piece of software, or an account that is misconfigured, or a system that has vulnerabilities by way of its configuration. So all these technologies aim to address that root cause. So the attacker, rather than actually reacting to an attack, they seal the holes that are exploited by the attack, the security holes. So the examples are vulnerability analysis tools, configuration analyzers, user authorization analyzers. So vulnerability analysis tools are those that go through, let's say, the source code or the binary code of an application, identify security holes, and suggest patches, and so that the developers can fix them before criminals can take advantage of these security holes. So because they aim to address the root cause of the problem, they are proactive. And the main benefit is that they are able to provide strong security guarantees. If you plug a security hole, then in fact you're avoiding all the exploits or attacks that can leverage that security hole. But the main drawback is that there is a considerable cost for adoption. In these days of developing and deploying software quickly, use of these tools can slow the adoption process, take more efforts and expertise in design and implementation, things like that. But so they haven't found the level of adoption that they needed to have. But the main benefit is that when deployed, they provide stronger security guarantees. So I'll come back to proactive technologies later if there is time. Today, we will mostly talk about reactive technologies. And in general, I think that software bugs are a reality that's here to stay. And cyber threats are another reality that we have to contend with. So it's not that we can just do with one approach, proactive or reactive. We will need both because, most software developed today contains bugs, and these bugs will be exploited. And so we need, as we apply proactive technologies to close these holes, we need the reactive technologies in place to counter the threats that are taking advantage of the holes that are present in the systems. So we need to pursue both directions concurrently. And so I'll start with the reactive dimension and what I have done in this space. So just to summarize the state of art in this area, and this area is broadly called intrusion detection. And the kind of attack that I described earlier involving NotPetya is called an advanced and persistent threat. It is a targeted attack that is aimed at stealing an enterprise's confidential data or causing destruction to the infrastructure. And so in short, they are known as APTs. And they leverage different attack methods and span multiple applications and hosts, right? And right now, enterprises collect a lot of security audit information that can assist in the detection. So there are tools in the enterprise called Security Information and Event Management Tools, SIEM tools, intrusion detection systems, identity and access management tools, the things that allow you to have an identity inside an organization, your logins, things like that. Application firewalls are the ones that protect requests that are coming in and requests that are going out. So these are all a set of heterogeneous systems that provide some security for a point problem. The main issue with these is that as and when these systems detect something, they produce alarms. And it's hard to correlate the heterogeneous alarms that are coming from all these different systems, right? So if there are different alarms raised by these many different systems, how do you connect the dots inside an enterprise if you are somebody who is responsible for cybersecurity? How do you make sense of the different alarms that are emitted by these different systems? How do you connect all the dots and make sense of the big picture of the attack that is going on? And right now, the way that is being done is that there is a cyber analyst sitting inside the enterprise trying to make sense of all this data coming at a very high velocity at them. And there is significant amount of manual effort and expertise to piece together these various alarms that are emitted by multiple security tools. So, the important problem is how do you connect the dots from all these, from the alarms raised by these systems? And so this was, as we started this work, roughly about 5 years ago, our goals were to sort of automate the detection and forensics. So we wanted to construct the big picture of any attack campaign that is being carried out against an enterprise. And we want to do this at scale. An enterprise may have hundreds of hosts, each, where there is a number of, several hundreds of thousands of processes running across all these hosts. And then these systems are producing alarms. And we want to build a system, a detection system that can deal with all this data at scale, right? And be highly performant, and be able to produce results in real time. The second goal is high-level scenario reconstruction. That is, if an attack is going on, how can we enable an analyst to infer the scenario, the attack that is being carried out, ascertain whether there has been an intrusion, understand the root cause, and determine impact. Right? So this is a second goal of trying to get the big picture of any attack campaign, right? And the third is threat hunting. Most often, enterprises are faced with the question, if there is a threat that is out today, a question that comes to someone's mind who's doing cybersecurity for that enterprise, have I been hacked by this threat? So when threat intelligence becomes available, right, we want to immediately know whether that threat happened inside our enterprise. So this problem is called threat hunting. And, and so our solutions also aim to help with the threat hunting problem. So with that, I will just provide a high-level summary of the various papers that we have written. And these are all in top, cybersecurity conferences. The first paper, the first system that we did was called SLEUTH, and it was published in 2017, and where we tackled the problem of attack scenario reconstruction from audit data. And then we wrote a second paper called HOMES, right, where we tackled the problem of correlating the information from various systems and producing a high-level threat scenario. And this paper was published in 2019. And the most recent work is called POIRO, which is tackling the problem of cyber threat hunting, where we are trying to see, given a piece of threat intelligence, whether that attack happened inside an enterprise. And this was published last year. So as you can see, we named the systems after the names of detectives, and the overall project was also called Marple. So we are kind of, maybe the next system will be called Drew and whatnot. So the names of detectives until we run out. Hopefully, we'll have a few more papers to go and a few more detective names to coin these systems. So what is the main technical foundation that we use? And this is something that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on so that people have a general understanding of the idea. So what we use what are called provenance graphs that have been well studied in the literature. And as you know, a graph is one with nodes and edges. And in this case, the nodes have labels. The labels are the names of processes like SSH, Bash, Firefox, the programs in your system. And the edges represent the dependencies that exist between processes and other entities. So, and note that the edges have a direction. That means that the flow of information on the first figure in the left is from SSH to bash. That is, SSH forks a bash process. And so SSH, by creating a new bash process, it is doing this action of fork, and the flow of information is from SSH to bash. Or in the case of the second example on the right, Firefox is writing to this file openme.exe. So the direction of the arrow is from Firefox to openme, right? And it is receiving information from a network IP address, which is given there 131.193.32.29. So the direction of information flow is from the network IP address to Firefox, right? So Firefox in this case is reading from a website. So the provenance graphs are a very simple structure that represent information. And as the activities in the system happen, we can describe them using these provenance graphs. Of course, they get very large with millions of nodes, or and even billions of edges. And in a given system over a given week, there are hundreds of thousands of processes that are running. So the graphs get very large, right? These graphs grow as the system audit log grows. But it does provide the full historical context of what happened in a system. And it allows us to reason about the relationships between events and objects, right? And the goal, one of the goals, is to represent all system activity in the form of a provenance graph for doing large graph analytics. So as you can see, what we want to do is to organize all this information in the form of very large graphs, and then reason about whether an attacker is performing any anomalous activity inside the enterprise with the help of these graphs. So you can think of this work as combining ideas from big data area, in the area of very large data sets, to that of cybersecurity. So we are trying to bring techniques that are used in graph analytics, very large databases and graph analytics, to the area of cybersecurity. So the general limitation with provenance graphs is that they have not been very scalable. In general, there are hundreds of millions to billions of edges in these graphs per day. And the forensic analysis, if you want to know whether an attack happened, it might take hours or days to complete, and it's not very timely. When an attack happened, you want to know within a few seconds that it happened. But if these graphs and the activities are very large, how to do this, right? And there is a general technical problem of dependency explosion, which I will skip, but this might introduce a number of dependencies and an explosion of false dependencies. So as a result, in the technical community, these graphs have not met with widespread adoption. And the challenge here for us was to make effective and efficient use of provenance graphs for real-time intrusion detection and attack scenario reconstruction and threat hunting. So what did we do in SLEUTH? The system is described using this picture, and I'll spend a good amount of time on this picture because I think these are some of the takeaways from this. So we take the dependence, the audit logs from Linux, Windows, and FreeBSD systems. So we can process the activities inside an enterprise that runs all these platforms. So an organization like DPI, people use Linux, Windows, and FreeBSD. And we then read all this information into a dependence graph that I showed earlier. And these dependent graphs, I'm giving a talk, okay? So I'm sorry about that. Yeah, as you know, this has become a familiar scene with all Zoom talks and calls, small children popping by. So, so what we do, construct a dependence graph, and then we apply some policies on these graphs. And those policies raise alerts, as you can see. And then these alerts allow us to traverse the graph backwards and forwards in time, thereby identifying the root cause and the impact. By root cause, I mean who how did the attacker come in? What were the initial steps? All the way to impact means what is the net effect of all the activities the attacker performed on the system? How do we make sense of the big picture of the attack? So this is these two analyses we do, and all of these is done in real time to give the cyber analyst a big picture view of what is going on. So in summary, what we have done is we create a space efficient in-memory dependence graph. That is, we are able to compress the set of activities happening in a system and place it in main memory, in a very, very compact fashion. So we keep billions of, edges and millions of nodes of the graph in main memory. So as you know, if we keep that on disk, it will be, the access will be much slower and the analysis will take weeks or days. But if we can do all this operation in main memory in this computer, then we can do this much faster and in real time as we envision, right? And we have a highly effective and efficient root cause and impact analysis using the attack detection techniques on these provenance graphs. And as I will show, natural experimental evaluation, these produce fast, accurate, and compact visual representation of APT, advanced and persistent threat campaigns. So, for instance, the graph that is stored, 2 weeks worth of audit data, which is roughly about 37 gigabytes on disk, can be stored very efficiently in main memory in just 350 MB. We develop compaction techniques to do this. I'm not going to talk about that in detail, but this allows us to keep more than 6 to 9 months of audit data in main memory and still do all this analysis very fast. And the main approach that we use is policy-based attack detection, and these policies are aided by what are called tags. So when data enters a network, we tag it. If it comes from an untrusted source, we tag that process that read this piece of untrusted data, and we propagate these tags inside the provenance graph. And there are policies associated. So for instance, when a process that has read from an untrusted website performs some action that is questionable, these policies get fired. And then when that process subsequently does something, again, alarms are raised. So that's our general approach for detection. And once the alarms are raised, then we can traverse the graph backwards and forwards, backwards for root cause identification. So when an alarm happens, I want to know, how did the attacker cause this alarm? What did the attacker do that caused this alarm? And I traverse the graph backwards in time to understand the root cause, and forwards, because the alarm happened and the attacker went on to do other things. I want to traverse the graph forwards to understand what its impact is. Okay, so we do this by developing algorithms that connect the dots, and I'll talk about each one using an example. So look at this example. Firefox is a browser that reads from this IP address, 129.55. It reads from this website. And here the attacker goal is to insert a backdoor into the vendor software. And, the attacker gets Firefox to read from this website, say through a phishing link. And when the Firefox then stores this file crt1.o in the disk using a browser vulnerability. So the attacker manages to get the victim to download this file and save it to disk. And simultaneously, the attacker uses the same vulnerability to modify Bob, who's our victim, Bob's.bash rc file that redefines the sudo command, right? And the next time Bob uses sudo, it copies this file to disk, right? And it stores that in /lib.crt1.o. This is, as you know, is a file that is linked with every executable that is compiled in the system. So effectively, anything that is done on the system will use this backdoor. So the next time Alice, let us say, who's another user of this system, compiles this file test.c, then this file is linked with the file that the attacker dropped, crt1.o. So this program test now contains the backdoor. And every program that is created on the system subsequently will contain this backdoor. So as you can imagine, that allows for the attacker to get remote access at some later point, right, to Alice's system. So if this Alice happens to be a software developer and Alice ships this software to her customers are now going to have these backdoors that spreads the attack even further. So you get the idea. So the question is, how do we detect the attacker placing this backdoor in Bob's and Alice's systems, right? So when the software is eventually run, what this does, the backdoor, it copies the EDC password, the password file, and exfiltrates that to an external IP address here, 129.55.33.70. So it's stealing the credential information and sending it to a website. So the question is, how do we piece together the high-level attack scenario that this is what happened, so that the cyber analyst knows that this is what happened and subsequently can perform some response operations. So we actually did many of these types of engagements. So we participated in a program from the Department of Defense, where the Department of Defense organized a red team that performed engagements very similar to what the attack shown in the picture is. And all these attacks were carried out over a 2-week time frame. And the length of the duration of the attacks is given in the second column. The first column shows the systems that they were used, for Windows, Linux, and BSD, the operating system. And the length is the total length of the campaign. As you can see, campaigns range from a few hours, 6 hours to 79 hours, right? And the number of events goes from 100K events. These are the number of activities as recorded in the audit logs in the system, all the way to 38 million records, right? And these were the types of activities: drop and load. It means dropping an executable like what I showed in the example. Gathering intelligence, looking in the system and network to get some intelligence about the enterprise. Insert a backdoor. Escalate privilege, which means that you sometimes try to get administrator access in the system. Data exfiltration, you saw the password file being stolen, so that's data exfiltration. Cleanup means no attacker wants to leave a trace of the activity, so any files that were created is all cleaned up, so the system looks like undisturbed to some some naive person, right? So DoD conducted all of these attacks using a professional red team, and we were part of the blue team that was tasked with detecting these attacks in real time. And I'm going to talk about how we performed in these engagements, how the system SLEUTH performed in all these engagements. Okay. So I think I'm going to just very quickly run over these slides because it talks about the technical approach, and it's more important to see in the big picture how all this works than get into the weeds of how all this works because of constraints on time, right? So we are going to ask whether an action advances the attacker's high-level objectives. So, and whether the attacker can control that action. So whether the attacker has the motive and the means to perform the attack. And our attack detection approach, uses tags to reason about both the attacker's motive and means, right? So the nice thing is that by reasoning like this, you can reason without having to worry about specific systems or platforms. So whatever we reason about in Windows works for Linux, works for FreeBSD, and also it's independent of Firefox. The browser uses Firefox or Chrome. Or so we are coming up with very general policies that make use of tags that are propagated in the provenance graph. And this is application independent. There is no need for any training. And it resists attacker manipulation. Attackers cannot have direct access to these tags, assuming that the provenance information in the system, like the kernel audit log, is not compromised. Right? So I'm just going to, so that policy on suspicious modification gets triggered when the attacker modifies the bash RC file. The policy on untrusted execution preparation is fired. There's an alarm that corresponds to each red box that's raised by the system when a particular policy is being violated, right? Here, an untrusted executable is being prepared, test, and therefore an alarm is raised. The question is, when the alarms raised in the red boxes pop up, how do we connect the different parts, pieces of the attack? How do we trace that everything originated from this website and got through to the system by use of Firefox, and how the activities in red are part of the attack campaign, whereas the activities in green are part of the normal use of the system. Alice is compiling this file test.c in green, right? So that's part of our normal activity. But the part where the attacker influences this activity is where the executable is linked with this crt1.o, which the attacker produced through the download of Firefox. So our system is able to reason with tags to produce the subgraph on the left, which gives the complete attack, the big picture of the attack, right? So this is again, there is a data leak, of the password file to the external IP address, so data leak alarm is raised. So everything in red is part of the attack, and everything is in green is part of the normal activity of the system. So once given a very large provenance graph with millions or billions of edges, our system is able to filter through all those data and produce an attack campaign graph that is small and easily understandable by a cyber analyst. And that's what we ended up doing for all the DoD red team experiments. So in all the campaigns, we were able to construct all the entities, the number of entry points of the attack, the programs executed, the key files involved, the exit points, and how many were correctly identified, how many were false positives, and how many were misentities. As you can see, there were only one instance of the attack on BSD1 where we had 15 false positives, but otherwise all the 174 entities involved in the attack were correctly identified and only one was missed, right? So, and this is amongst the millions of records that I showed. So we are able to kind of separate the signal from the noise. There is billions of, activities happened throughout all these systems. And we are filtering out 175 entities from all that. So you can imagine the scale of reduction, about 5-6 orders of magnitude reduction in the total volume of information that we are looking at, exactly zooming in on the attack activity. So this is what our system produces. It produces a graph that gives an entire big picture of the attack. So the attacker, you can follow the graph easily. The numbered edges are like timestamps. So the activity that labeled 1 happened on the edge, happened first, followed by 2, 3, like that. So and the first step was the attacker providing some information to Firefox from this malicious website that has this IP address. And then Firefox writes this file, Mozilla Nightly. This is a scenario on Windows, okay? And then Mozilla Nightly subsequently writes a number of files, photosnap.exe, msn.exe, and so on, right? And then, as you can see, it executes a number of commands that exfiltrates a lot of sensitive information. What is the name of the host? What are the connections? What is the IP address? And so on and so forth. And all this information is collected, written onto a file that gets exfiltrated back to this host. So as you can see, the attacker comes in through a vulnerability in Firefox, performs a lot of reconnaissance inside the network, and exfiltrates that information. And this activity is summarized in this graph out of several hundreds of thousands of activities that happened in the system normally. So you can see how our system is able to zoom in on the real attack and discards all the data that is part of the normal activity in the system. And we are able to produce this activity in real time in a matter of few seconds after it happened. So the cyber analysts in that enterprise can effectively respond to these attacks. So this is another graph scenario for BSD3. It follows a similar pattern where a file drop bear is being created. This was actually modeled after some real world APTs, right? And this was a scenario on Linux where this file again, drop bear, reads from password, shadow, all these sensitive system files and exfiltrates that information. So overall, I think this was the evaluation results. On all the systems, we were able to detect all the attacks, and our number of events were 100K to 39 million, but the number of entities involved in the attacks, as I showed you, is about 175. So that was, and we were quite successful in the DARPA adversarial engagements, and we wrote the paper. And now I'm going to talk about, Karen, how much time do we have? 12:50.
We've only got about 10 minutes left of the session.
Okay, so maybe I'll just kind of give you a very quick overview of what we did in the next paper, but maybe not. So as you know, the attacker follows a kill chain of initial compromise, establish foothold, escalate privileges, do internal reconnaissance, move laterally within the enterprise, go from one system to the other, maintain presence, create a backdoor of some sort, right? And complete mission, right? So this is what is called the kill chain, of the attack. And the question is, if we give a picture of a kill chain like this for every attack, would that help the cyber analyst? If we give this picture that allows the cyber analyst to comprehend what's going on very quickly, let's say a few seconds after the attack happened, can they do what is needed to sort of from the enterprise bleeding through this attack? And can they do the things that they need to do to minimize or mitigate the damage, right? And so the answer, through the home system, we answered yes. We came up with a way by which every attack can be, because the graph that I showed you in the earlier picture, it's very detailed and it gives a lot of events. It's still small compared to millions of records, but it's still very detailed. The question is, can we give a big picture like this? What are the processes involved in all these stages, and what does each stage do? What are the activities they target? What are the entities they are after? And can we map it to this kind of kill chain, right? And the answer is yes. And we did this through the home system, So as an example, the top part represents the normal activities in the system, and the bottom part represents the various internal compromise, establish foothold, privilege escalation, reconnaissance, cleanup, exfiltration. So the question is whether we can map all these activities to the kill chain as shown in this picture, so that the cyber analyst gets a better comprehension of the attack. And so, and the answer is yes, and we are able to do that through this system called Homes, and it does this admirably with very few false positives or false negatives. That is, no false alarms or no missed attacks. And so I will probably not go into the details of the system, but let me talk about the threat hunting. Whenever there is a threat out, let's say there is a new threat intelligence that's being released today, the question that comes to a cyber analyst is, has my enterprise been a target of this threat, right? And the state of art isn't very good in this, right? There are loose indicators that indicate attacks, but none of them are very robust. And so people manually explore this question. We asked whether we can actually do this in an automated system, and the answer is yes. The way we do this is by creating a query graph, and we represent the system behavior like in SLEUTH, like a big provenance graph like this. And we ask, is the smaller graph embedded inside the larger graph? Can we, just like we do a database query, can we do a graph query and see whether there is a match? If there is a match, then we know that the threat happened inside the enterprise, right? So the answer to this question also, we answered yes, we can effectively do threat hunting using this approach, and we created a system called Poiro, that performs this threat hunting, and this is an example that illustrates that, but I won't go through that. So I just want to talk a couple of minutes about the impact, right? Already, the project is having impact. The lead student who worked on this for his PhD under me, he is now working with the Google Enterprise Security team and trying to transition many of his ideas from the PhD to the world of practice. And we want to take this work was funded by the Department of Defense as well as by NSF. And currently what we are doing is scaling this approach to work on large enterprise networks to hundreds and thousands of hosts. And we are dealing with numerous technical challenges there. And we are also building and strengthening existing correlation indicators and integrating techniques like anomaly detection with this, right? So that's as much as the reactive part side of my work, a quick summary. So I'll come back again and speak about the proactive analytics that we are doing at some later point, but I'll just open the floor for a few questions if people have any questions, and then back to Karen.
Thank you, Venkat. yeah, open it up to anybody who has a question for Venkat about cybersecurity. And maybe while we're waiting for people to generate their questions, Venkat, you can talk about what are some of the foundational skills that people should study if they want to be enter the cybersecurity job market?
So there are many different positions in the cybersecurity world, right? There is the cyber developer, somebody who is skilled in developing, software technologies with the expertise in cybersecurity, so that the systems are not prone to cyber threats, right? So I'll address that in a subsequent talk, how to do those, what are the tools, but that's one area. Cyber analyst is somebody who is doing the job that I described during my talk, looking through all the information that is coming inside from an enterprise, from an enterprise system, and seeing whether the enterprise is under threat, right? So the analyst job is to make sense of all the activity that is going on in the system, deploy tools, and make sense of the information emitted by these tools. And the work that I talked about is addressing the cyber analyst directly. In terms of the specific skills that are required to be a cyber analyst, one needs to, of course, understand system administration, Unix, Windows, system administration, network administration. It's a kind of a suite of skills and a good knowledge of cyber threats, and what the different types of threats are and how are they caused, what are the popular mitigation mechanisms, what are security technologies that are out there that prevent these threats, how to effectively use them, what are their pain points, how to manage security inside an enterprise. And for that, you need, how to manage systems as well, system administration skills, cybersecurity, management skills, and, and the general knowledge of attack technologies as well as, defense technologies. I think that's what cyber analysts do. There are cyber, designers, designers of systems. Those are people that are looking at how to come up with architectures that provide some robustness for security. And those are not actual developers, but they do make decisions that impact how software development happens.
What about tools and applications that cyber jobs would use?
Oh, there are tons. Again, these get very sort of platform specific. But how to integrate information from a variety of commercial and open source products and reason about them, whether it is forensics tools or intrusion detection tools or firewalls like IP tables. So in general, to be a good cyber analyst, a broad set of skills, involving various tools and technologies is needed around the area of intrusion detection, prevention, firewalls, application configurations, and some, good background in system administration, right? All this is necessary prerequisite to be a good cyber analyst.
Okay. Well, I don't see any questions popping up, but let me share my last few slides before we close out here. Got to get everything in the right place. So at TechReady, we have a few programs in cyber. One popular one is a certificate in A+, Network Plus, and Cyber, offered through Illinois Institute of Technology. It offers foundational and intermediate skill building. And the next cohort of that course will start next semester in January. I don't have the exact start date yet. We have a program in Cisco Cybersecurity Essentials through the City Colleges of Chicago, offering foundational skill building. That is a rolling admission. The only requirements are that you be over 18 and that you are a resident of Chicago. But that is a pretty quick registration process. I went through it myself just to see how it went, and is pretty quick. That program overall, I can't remember, I think it's fairly short, like 30 hours of material as a foundational introduction to cybersecurity essentials. Third one on the list is Cybersecurity Boot Camp, also offered through the City Colleges of Chicago, offering foundational and intermediate skill development. That deadline just passed, and another one will be coming soon. So if you're interested in a boot camp, stay tuned and we'll have that information updated, posted to our TechReady website very soon. And then the last one I want to highlight today is a nonprofit partner that is working with TechReady, organization called IC Stars, offering foundational skill development called IT Business Leadership Bootcamp. It's actually a 2-year program for low-income adults, and more information can be found on our website. So thank you for coming today. We're going to take next week off from our regularly scheduled weekly Wednesday webinar series, but we'll be back next week with more great tech content. So in the meantime, if you have ideas about what you would like to see, content you'd like to know more about, please send us an email at hello@techreadyillinois.com. A couple other reminders. We'll be sending you a recording of today's webinar. You can see that in the next couple days, along with an invitation to upcoming webinars. Also keep a lookout for our upcoming newsletter, be coming out next week. We'll be talking about the job hunt relative to tech careers, with a specific focus on older workers and trying to deal with some of the obstacles you might find as an older job searcher. And finally, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and like us on Facebook. We love to be able to communicate with you on those platforms as well. So thanks again and have a great day. Look forward to seeing you again here soon.